Well, hi everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to tonight's Joe Chaffee Weather Show, where we have a Category 4 hurricane now in Hurricane Erik. We have a Category 1 hurricane with Hurricane Flossie, both in the Pacific. And we have a little peppering of severe weather in parts of the Northeast. Saw a couple of active thunderstorms move by near my house today. I wasn't home for it, but got word that there was some hail and lightning strikes. Timothy Veltman, I was going to reach out to you today because you hadn't been on in a while. Was getting a little concerned that something was going on, but I'm glad to see you on board tonight. You mentioned too, up your way in upstate New York, some strong thunderstorms with some lightning strikes there. Very tropical today. The temperatures were in the 90s. Most areas topped out in my area of the Northeast between 90 and 95. The dew points weren't quite as off the wall like they were last Monday when we had dew points up in the low and mid 70s. They were more like mid 60s to around 70, but the air had a distinct tropical feel to it with a bit of a flow coming in from off the ocean. So you got some nice shots of building cumulus clouds, and also again the sky in and of itself just kind of had that sort of tropical look. But it just made for a very uncomfortable day. When it's like this in Florida, it's one thing. When it's like this up in and around New York City and down near Philadelphia, it's not fun. Okay, it really is not fun. So look, we're going to start off tonight. We're going to start first with the two hurricanes, particularly with Erik, because that one is front and center at the moment and closest to Hawaii. And I've got a couple of things that I want to show you. We talked about last night where Hawaii kind of sits out there, and you would think that they would get a lot of hurricanes, but most of them either fall apart before they get there or they pass in a weakened state to the north or to the south. Direct hits in Hawaii are actually rather rare events. So we'll start with tonight. We'll start with the wide satellite view of both Flossie and Erik. Now it's hard to see on this because of the wide view of the shot. I'll have a tight shot up in a moment, but there is you can actually see perhaps on the first few frames during the overnight it shows up well. There is a pinprick eye in Erik as it continues to move on a course just a little bit north of due west, and it's just sort of plodding right along. Hawaii, the big island of Hawaii, sits at about 155 degrees west. There are a couple of things I want to point out though. Look at the clouds that are to the west of Hawaii. They are moving southwest to northeast, while the lower clouds are moving east to west. There is some wind shear there, and it seems like there's a almost semi-permanent area of wind shear that is south of the Hawaiian Islands, and it acts to protect the islands as these storms approach. The shear gets involved, and you start to see the systems weaken. So you have that to deal with, and you also have the cooler than threshold ocean water temperatures, and I'm going to show you those in a moment too, which is the other reason why these approaching Category 4 or even at times Category 5 hurricanes just weaken, and they just can't sustain that kind of strength because of the cooler ocean. Now to the right, on the lower right, you can see now what has been upgraded to Hurricane Flossie, which is moving right along to the west. And the top winds here, minimal hurricane, 75 miles an hour, but it is forecast to strengthen. It got hung up for a little bit strength-wise during the overnight, but it seems to have gotten itself a little better organized today, and it is likely to get stronger, might even get to major hurricane status for a short time on its track to the west. You'll notice that the clouds to the north are moving pretty much straight from east to west, so there is a ridge of high pressure that extends from the west coast of the U.S. and the Baja Peninsula on westward out to the longitude of Hawaii and a little bit beyond that. So that ridge is kind of holding in place, And it seems as if the models have been kind of erring too far north too soon. So it may be underestimating the strength of the ridge to the north, which is forcing these systems to continue on a more westerly course. Now here's a close-up loop of of Erik, and it's every bit a Category 4 hurricane here. That's a well-defined small eye that is there. You have that sort of circular look to it. The system is going to probably reach its peak intensity shortly, if it hasn't already. It's on the longitude there. That's 140. I believe that's 145 west there. And then you have the 15-degree north latitude line. Now, where it is, we have ocean water temperatures that are certainly supportive of a Category 4 hurricane. But I want to show you what happens when you get close to the Hawaiian Islands. Now, there's a profile of the water temperatures, the water temperature analysis as of yesterday in Hawaii. Now, you need, in order to sustain a Category 3 or higher, at the very least, you need ocean water temperatures running at about 28 degrees Celsius, or about 84 degrees Fahrenheit. And you'll notice that Hawaii is up around, the Big Island is just south of 20 degrees north and right near about 155, 156 degrees west. And then, of course, the other islands going northwestward are all between 20 and 22 degrees north. You'll notice that the water temperatures in and around Hawaii are actually less than 28 degrees Celsius. And in fact, right around the Big Island, it's less than 27 degrees Celsius. That's about 81 degrees Fahrenheit. So you really have to keep it down. Here's 14 degrees north. That's kind of where your line is for 28 degrees Celsius water. So if it starts gaining some latitude as it approaches the Hawaiian Islands, it's going to get into that cooler water. So at the very least, it's going to take it down well below its current level as a Cat 4. And, probably let's forget the wind shear issue for a moment, but with 27 to 28 degree water temperatures, you're talking about maybe being able to sustain a Cat 2 at most. So you've got that working against the system as it moves westward, and also the fact that as we pointed out on the satellite, that on the loop, that you saw that wind shear. Now, on this particular loop, there's clearly no evidence of any wind shear going on as you go to the west. So there's still, the upper air conditions are still supportive. I think it's going to have to start once it gets to the west of 150 degrees west, that's when we're going to start to see the weakening from all of this. So certainly a well-defined system the way it looks right now. And back to Flossie, because when we look at Flossie, it's just kind of on that same track, just a few days behind. So it could very well follow a similar track, or if there's a little troughing that's left behind, it might draw Flossie a bit more to the north. But again, the same issues are going to be here, and in fact, the upwelling of the water as it gets west towards 145 and 150 is liable to cool those ocean water temperatures a bit more and bring them down, and that'll be another issue with regards to the storm, the second storm, in terms of maintaining intensity. Now, this is Erik's forecast from the Hurricane Center. And one of the things that the Hurricane Center has done is they kind of shifted things a little bit further to the south, and also they're holding on to the strength a bit longer, where it's still a hurricane 8 a.m. Thursday, when it's at about 152, 153 degrees west and just north of 15 degrees north. But on this track, if it holds, and I think that given the strength of the ridge to the north and the model's tendencies so far to have pulled this too far north to begin with, you are going to see perhaps a little bit more of a southern adjustment to this. If it passes this far south of the Big Island of Hawaii, you're probably going to see only the fringe effects up to the north. The track here would take it a good 150 miles or more south of the Big Island. So that doesn't even put you anywhere close to the core. Now, if you want to kind of take a midpoint here, maybe by the time it gets to 155, it'll be a strong tropical storm at that point. And the Hurricane Center does hold it as a tropical storm as it moves it west-northwest, but again, passing well south of all the islands. The key is going to be that ridge to the north and whether that ridge to the north holds. Now, Flossie, also, the Hurricane Center's kind of adjusted this a bit further to the south, keeping this as a hurricane. They don't officially take it to a major hurricane status, but they do allow for the possibility that you could see it reach 115 mile-an-hour winds or more, 100 knots or more. But they do keep Flossie as a hurricane right through the forecast period, where it gets to about 17 and a half, 18 degrees north, and about 147 degrees west. So it looks like it might be around 19 and 150 by if you want to extrapolate out. The weaker it gets, it's likely to turn a little more westward. So we're going to have to watch both these systems very closely, obviously. And here's what the European does with all this. Now, let's forget the intensity on here because the pressures are obviously wrong. But when we follow the track of Erik, it looks like it takes it to about 16 and 157. So that's well south of the Big Island. You can see Flossie behind it is rolling right along as well. You have high pressure to the north, surface and aloft, sitting to the northwest of Erik, to the north of Flossie, and then another big high out in the Pacific to the northeast of Erik and north of Flossie, and also to the northwest of Erik. Erik moves along, and now Flossie starts to come in westward. The European wants to keep Flossie further south. It does bring it over the islands, weakening, of course, as it does so. But obviously, the first storm is going to have impact on the second. So we really have to just kind of see what plays out with Erik first and foremost, and then we'll deal with Flossie. As far as the timing goes for Hawaii, so we're looking at Thursday as Erik going by to the south. And if we follow Flossie along, that really doesn't come until maybe later Sunday or Sunday night into Monday, if depending on what kind of forward speed this has. So very interesting that we're seeing this activity out in the Pacific. And since we are talking about the tropics, let's look at the Atlantic now, where we have two systems that the Hurricane Center is mentioning on their tropical weather outlook. Of course, we talked yesterday about the system that was in the Eastern Caribbean that got ripped apart, and there is a lot of clouds and showers from the Leeward Islands to over Puerto Rico to the Dominican Republic and Haiti. The shower activity has been extensive over Puerto Rico in the last 24 to 36 hours. They've gotten quite a bit of rain, but it's very disorganized. Look at how the clouds are moving just basically in all different directions at all different levels. So you got all sorts of wind shear issues here that you're dealing with. So there's nothing really all that organized. Now, it's possible late in the week, and as we get into the weekend, when a lot of this moisture is going to be moving up northwestward through the Bahamas and maybe just along or just off the east coast of Florida, that we could wind up seeing conditions a bit more conducive for tropical storm development. Meanwhile, down on the lower right, you can see a tropical wave, a rather strong tropical wave that is moving westward. It seems to be holding its own as it is doing so. It's right along or just south of 10 degrees north, so it is pretty far south. You have clouds to the ahead of it. You'll notice those clouds are moving from south to north, so there are some wind shear issues here. The conditions are not really conducive for tropical storm development, but the wave probably, as we get also toward the weekend, we might see conditions a bit better once it gets perhaps west of 50 degrees west. There's another tropical wave coming off the African coast behind it, so we're starting to see a little bit of regularity when it comes to these waves coming off, and also the fact that they're now coming out at around around or just shy of 10 degrees north. You want to get them. You want to see if they can push up a little bit further to the north, so you'll get some spin to them as they go westward. But for the time being, the waves are the latitude is a little bit to the far to the south, but we are starting to see more and more of that activity. But nothing nothing in the Atlantic Basin looks to develop into a tropical depression or a tropical storm anytime soon. Here's a close-up view, by the way, of the system in the over Puerto Rico. And again, look at how the clouds are just basically going in all different directions. You've got some of them blowing off to the northeast. You've got some other cloud tops blowing off to the northwest. Certainly do have a lot of showers and downpours here, but very, very disorganized. And also you can watch the daytime development of big thunderstorms in Cuba that occurs, and also over the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So a lot of disorganized weather here, but nothing that's going to be a problem anytime soon. Meanwhile, we've got a rather busy looking radar in the northeast, but I think this is pretty well past its peak now as far as intensity is concerned. We do have a working severe thunderstorm watch from northeastern Pennsylvania through much of New York State, but there are some strong cells that are moving northeastward through the west side of the Catskills and then up the Hudson Valley north of I-90 into eastern New York, northeastern New York, and into Vermont. We had a few pop-ups today in New Jersey and Long Island, in the Hudson Valley and Connecticut, but they were widely scattered and mostly isolated. The area of severe weather is going to shift tomorrow to the immediate coast. And we're also seeing some activity back down in western Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, down into parts of Tennessee and in North Georgia. The radars are a little bit busier today as this weather front begins to push on through and the upper trough that goes along with it. Right now it's 7:22 Eastern Time, so if you're watching this later on a replay, please bear that in mind, that as far as severe weather is concerned, you want to make sure you have the latest weather information. So please go to your local National Weather Service office forecast page, and you can find that by going to weather.gov. Now here's the Storm Prediction Center's current risk area, and you've got the blue severe thunderstorm watch up in upstate New York. They added a slight risk today. They started with a marginal risk, and they went to a slight risk, and I think that we might see the same thing happen tomorrow. We could very well see the risk areas get beefed up a little bit, but the thing to watch for tomorrow, much like we saw last Monday, if you remember, when we got to Monday, we saw a significant amount of daytime heating that occurred that the models did not pick up on. We wound up seeing many areas, especially nearer to the coast, go partly to mostly sunny for a good portion of the day and boosting temperatures up about 5 degrees or more above guidance. And that extra daytime heating certainly put a lot of extra juice into some of those thunderstorms. So I would look very closely tomorrow morning at what is the state of the satellite, how much do we have a large area of clear skies along the coast to allow for at least daytime heating into early afternoon, because that may determine just exactly how strong the thunderstorms get. I'm going to come back to the severe weather map, as I want to show you SPC's map for tomorrow, and then we'll continue on with where we're going forecast-wise. But this is their risk area for Wednesday, and again, right now it's marginal risk from Northeast Virginia right up through much of Maine. This really does look a lot like the risk area they had drawn for last Monday. So I'm wondering whether we may wind up tomorrow morning seeing them at an area of slight risk, maybe from the northern half of New Jersey right up into perhaps eastern Massachusetts, covering a good chunk of southern New England, and that would include maybe putting Philadelphia on the edge, or possibly even including them. I don't want to second guess them. I really think that regardless of whether it's a marginal risk or a slight risk, these thunderstorms have been overproducing from the standpoint of model guidance. So I think we have to really respect that and expect that these thunderstorms might rev up a little stronger than what is currently being advertised. So let's look at what's happening with respect to the pattern. I'm going to use the European, because I think the European at least will give us 24-hour increments, and we can kind of get the general idea of what's going on. And of course, we've got this next trough, which is rather broad. It's nothing like the one we had last week, which we can't go back and look at. It doesn't go back far enough. But the trough, the main energy is lifting up over James Bay and into Labrador, and you're getting the trough to kind of stretch out, and it's slowing down. So the southern end of that trough is basically creeping along to the east. Now, this of course is going to set up the thunderstorms for tomorrow, but it's also going to set up a stalling of that front off the coast from south of Long Island, east of New Jersey, and kind of bringing it back inland near North Carolina and back through Tennessee. And I think that's where you're probably going to see that frontal boundary just hang out for the rest of the week and then gradually weaken. So to get rid of all of this, it's going to take that northern jet to just kind of come down with another short wave, which is what it does here on Saturday. You can sort of pick it out. A strengthening upper low in southeastern Canada. The GFS showed this yesterday. So as that trough swings around, it'll probably push a cold front through maybe Saturday night or early Sunday, and assuming everything moves along, it should bring down some drier air, particularly Monday into Tuesday, where we could see dew points down in the 40s across the New England, certainly, and the Northeast. Maybe the dew point relief will extend down into southern Pennsylvania and southern New Jersey, and might even bleed a little bit further south than that, but it'll be a decent shot of dry air coming down. There's another stronger trough coming in behind it for Tuesday and Wednesday. So there'll be a shot of dry air Monday into Tuesday, then perhaps another cold front, a quick rise of dew points as we go into midweek, and then another push of drier air for Thursday into Friday before the pattern just kind of flattens out again. It's been this sort of succession of watching this flat ridge across the southern part of the United States, occasionally flexing and building northward, the jet stream in Canada occasionally flexing and pushing everything southward. We've been like this probably since a good chunk of the month of June, and of course virtually the entire month of July, and I don't see any reason why we're going to see that change anytime soon. So looking at the new GFS, and here we have it. Now, I know you're all already probably looking at the lower right because it did have, it does show, the GFS does try to develop the tropical system. I would be very cautious, as always, when you see the GFS or any of the models spinning things up. You have to use it with a big grain of salt, particularly when you're outside the 5-day time frame. The model is not spinning up that moisture that's over Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and Haiti. It just kind of draws it northward along the coast of Florida. And then you have on Sunday, we've got this next front coming through with that 1020 high in Wisconsin. This is rainfall. It's not what the radar echoes are supposed to look like according to the GFS. This is what the radar echoes are supposed to look like. And it does have a much tamer view. Here's your front for later tomorrow. Again, with these short-range issues with this front, it's all about the risk and it's all about the dynamics. So I think you have to respect that. The models have not done well showing, especially the short-range models have not done well in showing these fronts with the thunderstorms. So we're going to respect the risk more. Even today wound up overperforming what the models were indicating. Now, the front stalls out. You see that little low there on Thursday in western North Carolina. So you get some convective development down in Virginia, North Carolina, but it's weak. This is not really setting up like some sort of wild overrunning pattern or a ton of tropical moisture shooting up the eastern seaboard. So I'm thinking downpours in some places possible, But on the other hand, you're going to have some drier air up to the north on Thursday and Friday that's going to probably get down into New York City, northern New Jersey, and Long Island. It might not make it into South Jersey and southern Pennsylvania southward, but I think there will be a little bit of humidity relief, limited though, into Friday. And then we're going to have to wait for that northern shortwave to kick a front through here along about during early Sunday morning, maybe around daybreak Sunday, and then you can get that nice high to pull in. May have to wait for one more wave to form along the Carolina coast to run out east-northeast, and that will bring in that dew point relief for later Sunday night, Monday in particular, lasting into Tuesday. And then we've got this other front that comes down to move through along about Wednesday. And, of course, with all these fronts, we have to respect the upper air and ask ourselves, well, are we going to see any kind of stalling or not? But right now, if you look at this, in terms of how the models are timing it, it would appear that you would get this trough in the east to come through in plenty of time. If there were some kind of tropical system, it would take it up and out. I'm not even going to consider evaluating this in my in analysis when we're looking at 9 days out. It's really silly to focus on that. But if you, in a situation like this, as you watch it evolve, the thing you look for is you watch to see whether the troughs time out with any kind of tropical system. So in this particular instance, after whatever happens Monday and Tuesday and that trough pulls out, the next one dives in. Now there's your trough in the east, there's your tropical system. It would suggest that there's enough troughing here and the westerlies are far enough south that you would take it up and out. Now, look, if something does develop and the timing is different, there's certainly room for that sort of stuff, those sort of changes to happen over time, but it's not something you're going to get involved with now. The bottom line is that the pattern overall still kind of remains the same. You get these troughs to come down from the north. The ridge tries to flex, even on the longer range as we move out around day 11 and 12. It's still pretty much the same story here. Wash, rinse, repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. It just it has been holding on to this pattern. I think part of the large part of the reason is the fact that you continue to see the models showing higher than normal pressures across the polar regions. We've seen the northern part of the jet stream displaced further south than what we would normally see, and then you've got some activity that comes in across the Pacific that gets into Canada, and then you get these short waves to drop down and move along. So I don't really see anything changing that much with respect to that in the longer term. It's that simple at this point. It just is. Okay, rainfall from WPC. It's always one of my favorite maps, and it should be yours too. So this is rainfall over the next 7 days. And of course, with frontal boundaries along and off the East Coast, Florida gets hit pretty hard with 5-inch plus rain amounts in central and south Florida, but much of the heavier rains are offshore. You do have some 2 to 3 inch rain amounts from interior South Carolina up into Virginia, and then the amounts lessen a bit to up to a couple of inches. Again, a lot of this is going to be convectively driven, so there certainly will be variability. We also don't want to ignore the fact that the rainfalls in western Missouri and eastern Kansas in the plains likely to be rather robust, with rainfall amounts of several inches or more there. And you're looking at 1/2 to 2 inch amounts in the southwest and on up through parts of the Rockies. The west is dry, a little bit of rain coming into the northwest. And also up in New England, you're seeing not a whole lot happening rain-wise, on the order of mostly under 1/2 inch over the next 7 days. So I guess it's whatever happens for tomorrow. Again, low, convectively driven, so certainly you could wind up in some thunderstorms where amounts could definitely be a bit higher. Okay, so I'm going to come on to the chat board here. So hang on 1 second. Nice to see everybody on board tonight. And PRJ Grudge, thank you again for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really, really appreciate it greatly. thank you so much. And if you need anything directly, just message me. You can message me on Facebook or shoot me an email. Be more than happy to help you out. Daniel Seaman, you're expecting, okay? All right, so we could take that several ways, okay? Expecting a thunderstorm, expecting a baby, which would be really nice. So if you would elaborate on that, that would be terrific. Nice to see all of the regular folks on board. Thanks as always for being here, including the always rain-soaked Johnny Quest, shooting for 100 inches plus of rainfall. Once again, Timothy Veltman, they had some strong storms at Saratoga today. Wasn't really paying close attention. Today's Tuesday, so it's a dark day. They went to Saratoga Racing's changed this year. It's 5 days of racing, Wednesday through Sunday, with dark days on Monday and Tuesday. They used to race for six days, so the length of the meet is longer, but the amount of racing is the same. They just added an extra off day, and then they started it, I think, 2 weeks early. So it works out to the same number of races. Schenectady and Saratoga bearing the brunt of the severe weather that's going on that's been going on today. Certainly the radar would bear that out. Please, Kristinapedia, and I respect the large capsules. I think your point is well taken. Please educate people about how it doesn't storm all over the world at the same time. Yes, correct. It doesn't storm all over the world at the same time. Getting your weather information from news stories written, you have to understand this. Weather stories that are written for newscasts are generally written by people who have no weather background. So or they're taken off the Associated Press. Now, I don't know who the Associated Press talks to, but most of the writers are young. Most of the writers for newscasts are basically under the age of 40, and in some of the your local television markets, they're going to be under the age of 30. So they're not going to know a whole lot. I mean, with all due respect to folks under 30, you need a 60-year-old like me to tell you that you don't really know that much. I'm not trying to be mean here, but especially in the news business where you haven't really seen enough, I can at least say that I've seen enough to know how things are going to turn out. And there's this sort of general there's this general view of wrapping all this stuff in the hysterics, in hysterics, and wrapping it up in sort of, let's call it, agenda-driven stuff that it's just total misinformation. And yes, you are right. And who say this wasn't forecast? I agree. Honestly, I would say probably 95 to 99% of the time it was forecast, but most folks don't listen. I will, mention, I can't tell you over the last couple of days, there have been some isolated pop-up thunderstorms. You mentioned in the forecast that there are going to be isolated pop-up thunderstorms. And if you are in the area that gets the isolated pop-up thunderstorm, you will interpret that forecast to mean that, well, I'm not supposed to get it. Then when you do get it, you seem to think that everybody within 150 miles of you has gotten it. So if you run into me, you say, where did that thunderstorm come from? How come you didn't forecast it? And my response would be, well, I forecasted for pop-up thunderstorms. Well, then I'll have the person who didn't get the storm, the pop-up thunderstorm, saying, you said it was supposed to rain and it didn't. And I will respond by saying, well, the forecast was for a pop-up isolated thunderstorm. And I've even added the line where I've said that 95 to 99% of you won't see a thing. And that's kind of how it turned out today. So, yeah, I've learned to just kind of let it roll off my shoulders when I hear stuff like that. It's very, very frustrating, especially in situations when you've got when you've got a difficult forecast ahead of you. And I think all meteorologists will relate to this. You've got a difficult forecast ahead of you. you really just put your head, heart, and soul into it, and it turns out that you kind of, for the most part, nail it. And somebody comes along and makes some sort of reflexive comment that you've heard a million times, has no sense of originality whatsoever. I just, at this point, I just throw my hands up. Those, you watch. If you pay attention, you know what's going on. A-Train. I'm out here in Aberdeen, Maryland, getting unloaded. Very hot. Hopefully, no rain tonight. Not much going on in Maryland, down in Virginia. I think in northeastern Virginia tonight, A-Train. But I think tomorrow might be a bit of a different story. You're right on the southern flank of that risk area for severe weather tomorrow. So again, watch for an elevation of the risk by the Storm Prediction Center. And Johnny Quest, you're correct. You can forecast rain every day and be right most of the time, at least this time of year. I think that is quite valid. We've got a happy birthday tonight for Chuck Cardillo. Happy birthday to you, sir. Chuck, every morning on Patreon, Chuck messages me. He says says hello, fills me in on what's going on up in his world in the Catskills. And I certainly enjoy it. It starts my day off as I'm beginning to do my weather in 5 and bang out my first weather post of the day. And yes, where am I going with that thermometer in my hand? Be very careful with that. Snowy 23, nice to see you here. Iron Mine, same. Chris Alley and everybody else that's on. I think Scott Briller, the chairman, was on earlier. I don't know if he has left the scene. I hope your mom's doing well, Scott, and continuing to make progress. And I think you said she was going back to work, but she was no longer driving the NASCAR circuit anymore. Paul Roman, Ulster County, some severe weather up your way yesterday, and I think you probably saw a couple of cells again today. I think we're gonna wind up with a busy day tomorrow. A lot of trees down by you, says Chuck Cardillo. So you got into some of those cells as they worked on through. All right, folks, let's wrap it up here at this point. It is coming up on 7:45 Eastern Time. Again, thanks everybody for being here tonight. I really appreciate it greatly. PRJ Grudge, thank you again for hitting Super Chat 2 nights in a row. I really appreciate that. That's another couple of cigars for me for the next few days. All right, so here's the deal tomorrow. I'm going to anticipate that there's going to be a rough round of severe weather somewhere, so that might throw the schedule off a little bit with regards to the timing of tomorrow night's live stream. So if it's busy, I may push it back to 7 o'clock. If it's really busy, I'll probably push it back to 8 o'clock. So it might be a shorter live stream. So it's just going to be weather dependent. We'll see what's on the radar, and we'll just take it from there. So just look for your notification, or if you're on Patreon, of course, you'll get your post telling you about the live stream a couple of hours beforehand. So again, for those of you who might be interested, the subscription platform that I do have on Patreon is just $2 a month. And you get a lot of extra weather, and when it's relevant, you will also get extra live streams just for Patreon members. One thing I will tell you is that I will be shifting my coverage of tropical storms and hurricanes away from Facebook and more onto the Patreon platform in the coming 2 to 3 months as we deal with the Atlantic side, and especially when something is relevant. So a lot of the extra stuff that I normally would put on the website as a separate post is going to go just for Patreon members. So consider that, because when we get into the winter months, you're really going to want to be on there, because we do a lot of winter forecasting just for the Patreon folks. And with respect to an easy way, I mentioned this yesterday, and it's always on the descriptor to this live stream or the descriptor to this video. If you shop on Amazon and you use my Amazon link, which I'm putting up also on the chat, Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin, and it's out of their pocket, not yours. And that's an easy way to support my channel because you get your stuff that you were going to get anyway, and it doesn't cost you a cent. We are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. Those of you who are watching from Hawaii, we will continue keeping you up to date. I did a little bit this morning on Weather in 5. So look for Weather at 5 tomorrow morning. I'll include a little bit on Erik and on Flossie, and then we'll have more extensive coverage on it tomorrow night on the regular live stream. Good night, everybody. We will see you tomorrow.